Starting now. We're live. Hello, YouTube. Thank you for tuning into my channel. I am Azrael, the Angel of Melancholy. My guest today is Zabora, the Kemetic Witch. Hello. Thank you for coming to my channel. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself personally, your channel?
Well, I'm Zabora. My channel is Kemetic Witchcraft here on YouTube. You can find it. I'm sure we could add links and stuff later. But my main practice is Kemetic Reconstructionism blended with the Hoodoo root working tradition to kind of supplement their form of magic known as Heka, which is speech magic, spirit invocation, using speech to manifest your reality.
That's actually found in a lot of religions in general. Probably, the Abrahamic faith as well, because they say words have power, and they've actually personified that word as Jesus. That Jesus, in the beginning, the Word was with God, and the Word became flesh. So they're really up on trying to make sure that they emphasize the power of spoken word.
Almost certainly. I mean, look how God made the world. He spoke it into being. And that mirrors even Ptah speaking the world into being, whereas most myths in the Egyptian pantheons and stuff require masturbation or some form of blood spilling or something like that. Ptah actually speaks the world into being as El, the father god, did.
Well, I mean, a lot of people. I mean, I pride myself, and I know a lot of about Egyptian mythology and some of the religion. But as far as Kemeticism, I never really explored that. So I'm still learning from your channel. One of the things I love about your channel is that when you talk about the gods, like Ptah, I knew about Ptah, but didn't know necessarily that he spoke things into existence. I know. You like to say "senepte" at the end of your videos. I assume that is a form of saying goodbye or till next time. You mind elaborating on that?
So actually, Senepti is like a combination of words. It's actually more of a blessing. It's I wish you health, wealth, and a long life, and it's basically like saying God bless you at the end of a video.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. Now, can you tell us what the word Kemetic means? I know that it's
So
Egyptian
yeah.
reconstruction, but
Well, see that was actually adopted. See, the word Kemet means black land, and it was actually one of the words that the Egyptians used to describe where they lived in the Nile Valley. Just like you have Tameri, which became Tamrin Wicca, Tameri is beloved land. So that is the etymology of Tamrin Wicca. So it's just a word that the Egyptians used. But Kemeticism was adopted and kind of basically made by pro-black groups that were trying to reclaim their heritage. Now, most of these groups were incredibly racist and focused on restoring their own power, and they didn't necessarily focus specifically on Egypt. They would incorporate other ideologies into their concept of what it was to be a Kemetic. So you will find things like Kemetic yoga under this type of category, where it's a blending of other beliefs and taking of other beliefs that necessarily aren't Egyptian. So that is where Kemeticism comes from. It's a word that simply evolved and has come to mean someone who practices Egyptian reconstructionism.
okay. Now, um, what got you into Kemeticism? And may I ask if, since you are knowledgeable in other paths, how does this really differ from, say, the popularized versions of witchcraft, like maybe that you would find in Wicca?
So what happened to me is actually I had a student, and for a long time I didn't feel like I was Wiccan anymore. And we're talking like 8 years or something of that, where I was like, "Oh, I just don't feel like I should call myself a Wiccan. I don't feel drawn to the rituals. The spell work most certainly worked. You know, having the circle and calling the elements and invoking the powers that be most certainly worked. But I never called on any sorts of god and goddess. It was more like an archetypal type being. And that's kind of maybe influenced my views on how I interpret Kemeticism and the Egyptian religion. But I had a student and I was teaching her because she was most certainly interested in spell work and Wicca. So one night we were doing ritual to make protection bracelets because we lived in a bad area. And Isis came to her, and Sekhmet came to me. And I heard the lioness roar, and I got basically hit in the back of the head with a 2x4 that said mine. And a firewall just kind of exploded in my mind. When I was younger, took a fireball to the face from a grill. So it was a lot like that. It was just like, have you ever seen like the Burger King commercials of the charbroiled flames that go up the TV?
Yeah.
Okay, it looked exactly like that, just in my mind. It was just enveloped in this wall of fire, and I heard this lioness roar, and I knew Sekhmet's got me. So that set me on my path of looking back at Egypt, because as a child I was always fascinated by Egypt and these gods that had animal heads, and they had gold and they lived forever and they built these monuments. I was fascinated with Egypt up until middle school. And then I got into the Greek mythology and more of the witchcraft thing, and then I boom, right back to Egypt. And then, of course, the more I learned about ceremonial magic and stuff, the more I learned, hey, a lot of this goes back to Egypt. A lot of this goes back to this part of the world where human beings possibly evolved from. So
Well, yeah.
that's kind of how that happened.
So this thought form, this deity, sought you out, basically.
That's exactly how I would describe it. And speaking to other followers of Sekhmet, that's how she calls all her people. It's one giant mine. You're coming with me. Come with
Kind of like
me
an
if you
Egyptian
want to
version
live.
of the Valkyries. Gotcha, you're coming with us.
Yeah, like this is mine. This one's for me. One
Well,
for Rob, one for Sekhmet.
well, okay. Well, one of the things that so I was talking to a rabbi. I'm not going to say his name, but there's a local synagogue around, and we talk philosophy or religion. And I actually, there's a Catholic interpretation that he was unaware of, and involved basically that first of all, we all know that there's the Israelites, according to archaeology, differs from the Bible. When they came out of Egypt, there were at best, there was handfuls of Canaanite refugees that would later become Israelites, but they overglorified the numbers to fit a certain religious narrative, and they conveniently said, let's wipe Moses's. The Pharaoh's going to wipe out Moses' name, just in case somebody goes fact checks. There's a reason why they're not going to find his name, but he doesn't really he's on the cusp. He doesn't know if Moses really did exist or was created for the patriarch to justify the Israelites a backstory. But anyway, in any case, one of the things that he didn't understand here, and I was surprised, is that the Catholic Church actually claims that the plagues on Egypt was just not punishment. That their God Elohim was systematically killing off the Egyptian gods, because if you look at all these little things, you have the firstborn, which is killing of the Pharaoh's son, which is God. The killing of the cattle, which I can't remember the name, but there's a bull-headed god.
Apis.
I'm sorry, Apis.
Apis, Apis. The Apis bull is actually a avatar of Ptah.
Okay. Well, again, it would go further on down to where the slaying of all the gods that represent the Nile, Sobek, or Hopi, looks like a frog, I believe. Or Hopi. by turning the Nile red, turning the blood. So it seems like basically they were systematic. I think that's what their narrative was, and it's like, wow, it sounds like the Christians are actually thinking for a change. But because he's like, I've never heard of that, but it sounds accurate. What they look like they were trying to do is create a narrative to now. Obviously, I brought that in because I study ceremonial magic, and one of the things that we do with the magic that we do is that I invoke certain forms, like God forms, like the Golden Dawn. There's rituals where you might invoke the God of Abraham, which they take as not a real God per se, like the God of Abraham, but the God as like the all manifest all, right? And they believe that this energy is channeled through all the gods. So it's why it's perfectly acceptable to invoke other gods. So in one of the rituals, we'll say, sign of Osiris slain, and then we'll move our hands about. And basically what I'm trying to say is that we'll call on names of various gods from Egypt that represent, Osiris would be, I think it was like, he's like this, where he holds the stuff and the pharaoh. And just like a Christian would if he says would steps in the form of the cross or something to invoke Jesus narrative, whatever. But other than that, I haven't digged too much deep into the connections, but there is clear connections that need to be investigated with westernized magic, where it uses the Kabbalah, because most definitely the Jews pulled from the Egyptian concepts. They just did, even the narrative where with Joseph with the coat of many colors, that guy, he practiced divination by dropping. He took in a silver goblet that his brothers supposedly came, and stole, or he didn't steal. They slipped it in his bag, and then they said, "Hey, you got my goblet. Is this not the goblet that my master drinks from and also practices divination?" Referring to the Egyptian custom of dropping oil into water to foretell or do a divination. Which I'm not sure how they did that, but that's the narrative. But of course, anyways, there's clear now. Speaking of, to help me out and our listeners, what are some great books to start out at if someone wants to learn about this path?
So, because my path is blended, this is something that I have developed over time. My path includes my witchcraft. So, I always recommend Sharon Laborde to get you started on the religion of Kemeticism. Hold on, let me grab a book here. Let's see here. Here we go. So this one here is her latest book. It's Celebrating the Egyptian Gods by Sharon Laborde, but she also has Following the Sun and Circle of the Sun. So those are the ones that I always recommend to get. But you did cover a lot of things, and I would happily go over those with you if you are interested. First thing you talked about. Okay, well, the first thing you talked about was the Exodus. And we know the Exodus didn't happen because the way that the Bible describes it is 2 million Jews living in one city of Ramses. So that actually gives us a period, a time frame. Ramses the Great, one of my favorite pharaohs actually, is at war with the Hittites, who are an Asiatic people that have invaded his lands. And they kind of just came in and just took over the Delta. No one really lives in the Delta. It's basically the marshland, kind of like Florida. No one really lived in Florida until we figured out how to live in the swamps without, living in the boat people. Yeah, so they were just kind of taking up the land that nobody wanted, until they just kind of started taking things that were Pharaoh's and disrespecting Pharaoh, and we cannot have that. So they go to war. And Ramses the Great, even though he was this big, powerful, great pharaoh, he actually only was able to come to a draw with the Hittites. And there's actually a story about him being arrogant enough to believe the two turncloaks that were like, ah, they're just a couple of miles down the road, and don't worry, their numbers are small. You'll totally wipe them out. And he's like, of course I will. I'm Pharaoh. And they're like, oh my God, their numbers are huge and they're closer than they thought.
Well, definitely
So,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I got to point out one of the definite things that archaeology has discovered is that Egypt did do census, basically counted their numbers, and during the supposed time of the Exodus, those people, if they would have left, there was more people left supposedly in the Exodus than even the ones that even inhabited the place. So
exactly.
it just doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
The Egyptians, they kept great number records. They kept excellent records, and there were more people supposedly living in this one city than there was in the entire country. So why did they not just take over the city at that point? Why are you even the fucking slaves at this point? You're crazy. And even if they left to the Holy Land following the coast, it would have taken 2 weeks, not 40 fucking years. There's divine guidance for you. But so the coming of the Egyptian gods, the annihilation of the Egyptian gods through the 10 plagues. We know the Hittites eventually lost the war because it was Ramses' son, Ramses III, who finally beat the holy fuck out of the Hittites and kicked them out of Egypt. So that was your great exodus. They lost the war, in my opinion. So this is Middle Kingdom. Okay, this is after Tut, I think. Like, right, this would have been like Tut would have been 18th dynasty, Middle Kingdom. So I think this is like right after Tut, a couple of lines removed. So that was your great exodus. They lost the war in the 18th dynasty, in my opinion. With the 10 plagues, though, you find similarities in one of the plagues that you find in Egyptian mythology. Sekhmet is, well, actually, the Eye of Ra is taken, thrown down to earth, who is Hathor, who transforms into Sekhmet or births Sekhmet, depending on the mythology, and she wipes out mankind. And in order to stop her, because Ra's like, oh my God, what did I do? She's killing everyone. He takes beer and pomegranate juice and dyes the Nile as red as blood in order to trick her into drinking the Nile. And she gets so drunk that she passes out for 3 days. And the first thing she sees when she wakes up is actually the man who she marries, her husband Ptah. And she falls instantly in love with him, the creator. So it's actually, I believe, an adopted ritual that the Egyptians used to do, because they used to, in order to placate Sekhmet and the 7 arrows of Sekhmet, they would throw beer that had been dyed red with pomegranate juice into the Nile. And you can still find remnants of Egyptian rituals in the Coptic Church. Reverend Victoria, if she's watching, I haven't checked. She's very interested in the Coptic Church because she leads an interfaith type life where she believes in Jesus and loves the Egyptian pantheon religion and everything to do with that. But they used to throw flowers in the Nile for Sobek, and now the Coptic Church throws flowers in the Niles for Jesus. And of course, that happens in every Catholic folk area, the Spaniard people adopting everything. So that's what I believe happened, is the Jewish people, when they were kicked out, they had this mythology having been exposed to the Egyptian religion, and they're like, oh, we don't want to make it look like we lost, so let's just make it look like we just left. So, my opinion, of course, but
the thing is, no, I mean, there's a lot of archaeological evidence to prove that they in fact did borrow. There is, you're familiar with there's civilizations that of Mesopotamia that kind of predated Egypt. Matter of fact, they plucked the Ark story right out of that shit. You have You have the gods say humans are too noisy, they too wicked, and then they say, well, okay, this old man here, I want to tell him to make a boat, put 2 of every animal on it. So they do the same thing, but of course they alter it to fit their religious narrative. So then, of course, you go even further. That's where Lilith first is ever mentioned in the epic tale of Gilgamesh, which is the oldest story we have written down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And where's Lilith? She's chilling in a tree with a serpent that can talk, and it's the serpent that cannot be tamed, in a garden where there's fruit that can offer immortality. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Oh, not to mention who's supposed to be Adam's first wife. That's not documented in the Bible, but within their oral tradition, Lilith. Right. So, in any case, yeah. So they clearly they adopted. Now, there's nothing wrong with that per se. I'm sorry.
Well, no, it's just like you find elements of Egypt in even Moses' story, you know, so it's no surprise that there are multiple religions that are found in the Jewish traditions. I mean, if they stole from Egypt, they stole from everyone.
Well, I mean, yeah, the thing is with the Christian narrative, I mean, obviously I show how it was actually, according to Philo of Alexander, literally it's told in the stars. Literally, the Virgo giving birth to the Virgin during or a Virgin giving birth to a star, or the morning star as it rises, as the sky turns through the year, a certain part of the year. And then later on, the same Jews believed in an angel named Yahshua or Yeshua, depending on how you pronounce it. Depending, Spanish people say Jesus, but it's Jesus. Different pronunciations at different times in different languages. Make a long story short, Jesus was an astrological narrative, and that would let the devil kill him so he could be resurrected, which is again nothing more than a cycle of the seasons where Jesus would die and the world would die and then resurrect and so forth. Do everything. The cross that he was crucified on was actually the little, if you was to take the sky and literally cut it into 4 seasons, that make that little plus within. That was the cross he died on. It's a lot of that stuff, and it was just given it's called humorization. It was a Roman guy that it's named after, who tried to give real backgrounds to bring these gods out of obscurity or thought, and say, no, this was a real person. This is a real history, and that's basically all that happened. And they do a mystery cult, and the Jews were forming that right there, because. Now this is before Christianity was ever thought that it even existed. So this thought process existed in a Jewish cult hundreds of years before the Christ was supposedly born. So they are already in the process with this death and resurrection being that they were also baptizing themselves to be a part of, so they would benefit from the suffering of this God. So I know that we're not talking about that, we're talking about Kemeticism, but it's the same thing, because that's what it was from. When people say Jesus is a copy of the pagan gods of Egypt, they're talking about a subculture, a subcult from the mainstream of Egypt. This was a Hellenized Roman cult, which believed that you could be baptized and benefit from the sacrifice or the murder of Osiris, and then the resurrection of Osiris temporarily, and therefore they can bypass the traditional afterlife of Amut and being, if I'm saying his name right, judged with the feather and the whole 9 yards. So this was, the Egyptian. So you wouldn't have Christianity if you didn't have that Egyptian subcult, and you wouldn't have that subcult if it wasn't for Egypt. So even Christianity can find its way back to Egypt, and part of Sumerian and the government, Babylon, all that stuff, everywhere, surrounding, you name it.
That's exactly what I did. Is I looked at ceremonial magic and the origins of that, and I was like, oh my god, I found Christianity. What the fuck? I was trying to escape Christianity, then I was like, wait a minute, this goes further. Keep going, Zabora, you're almost there. And then I found Egypt, and I was like, of course, I've always been interested in Egypt. This has been my home the whole time. And like you said, there's elements of the death and rebirth and resurrection in every religion. And it's because people used to live outside, People used to actually depend on nature instead of manipulating nature. So the life, death, and rebirth, everybody went through winter, including the Egyptians. They had their planting season when the Nile flood would come after the snows had all melted off of the mountains and flown down into the Nile and flooded the Nile. So you have the death there, and then you have the regrowth and the life springing forth from the black silt, which is Kemetic. That's where that land comes from, the black land, the black silt. It's actually where we get our word desert. Deseret means red land, and that's where we Americans get our word desert from. It's from the Egyptian word for red land. So I believe that's correct. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's correct.
It's something similar. Like there is a Norwegian goddess named Yard, and supposedly is the mother of Thor. All right, and which Thor and Loki were supposed to be half brothers. But be that as it may, that's where we get the word land or yard from, was from this goddess. But I'm not entirely sure how accurate that is, but it sounds logical because it sounds same. But you never know. You never know. I guess one more question I want to ask you before, if we can. Sorry, YouTube guys, I am so YouTube illiterate on many things, so I don't know. I don't see the comment section. I know it's been enabled. So I'm going to ask Zabora this question, and if we could find the chat, if you guys are there, have her answer some of your questions. My question.
I'm gonna check the chat right now. Just give me a second. Okay, go ahead. Ask away.
All right. The question I wanted to ask you is, what's your favorite ritual that is Kemetic based? And then the floor is yours for a couple minutes, whatever. If you could ask any questions in the chat.
Okay, so I basically use the same ritual for just about everything, as weird as that sounds. So all my rituals open the same way. And it's a repetitive process, and that's kind of what ingrains it and makes your magic stronger, is when you just know these things, and it's muscle memory, in my opinion. So my ritual is the Iru, and it means things done. And I have a purification setting. Then I have an invocation setting where I have purified my space. I am invoking the gods. And that was something that you had kind of brought up earlier about invoking elements of things that have come before. That's an Egyptian concept as well. When they invoke deities, they actually become those deities. When I say I am Sekhmet, I am Tehuti, it's not out of disrespect, because the universal energies don't recognize politeness. They recognize strength and power. And when you say those things as a being that has done these powerful things before, then you are basically making that so. So when I say I am Sekhmet, I am stepping into Sekhmet's shoes, and I am able to do everything that Sekhmet is able to do as a powerful goddess. And that's kind of one of the concepts that I really love about Egyptian magic, is you are taking on the form of a god in order to manifest your will. I know it seems like a little bit of an egotistical kind of thing, but that's one of the things that I really like. So yeah, that is the Egyptian setting. It's the invocation period, and then I'll do whatever I've come to do, and that's where the hoodoo aspect comes into play, where I may use more of the writing. I may actually write hieroglyphs down to do a spell or something like that. Writing is a major part, so petition papers are a big part of my rituals. I would say maybe like my favorite holiday ritual would be the appeasing of Sekhmet, where you would kind of protect yourself against the 7 arrows of Sekhmet throughout the year. It's kind of like the New Year blessing. I would say maybe that would be one of my favorite rituals. But then there's also the ritual of drunkenness, or the Feast of Drunkenness, where you offer Sekhmet red beer and you get mad drunk and you party. So, yeah.
Sounds like one of my favorite little rituals. But yeah,
Well, yeah, the Egyptians were all about celebrating life, and that's something that the afterlife was. It was not just it is a continuation of the next life. It wasn't just some place to be feared. It was a celebration because that's the next party. It's the after party to the party.
yeah, you gotta enjoy being alive now. You can be dead a lot longer.
Yeah, I mean it was a preparation for the eternal party.
All right. Well, I guess I mean I could touch another little subject, but I want to go ahead and move it to the chat room. I can't find it, I don't see nothing in mine. But basically, we have one called the Bornless Ritual, right? Where basically you're saying, "I am he who creates the male and the female. I am he. I am the one creates the just and the unjust." Basically, you're saying you're God. You're channeling the universe to give yourself authority to summon a spirit or demon. And of course, the difference, you have the left-hand path and then the right-hand path, kind of people that summon demons. The right-hand path, which tend to be the Christians that threaten the demons, the name of this God and that God, or if you don't come, I'm going to burn your sigil to cause you pain, blah, blah, threatening. And then the left-hand path is like, hey, be their friend and they come willingly eventually. Kind of like, kind of like things. Yeah, but the more when you actually step into the authority of the divine God or goddess, whatever you want to do. But anyways, let's move on to any questions if there's anybody in the chat room, because again, I can't see.
So there's no questions. There certainly is a flat Earth lizard person though. So that's kind of fun. Their channel's got 2,500 subs, and they are talking about the lizard people and Jesus. Because those things go hand in hand.
Well, I have seen the Raptor Jesus memes. Not to be taken on anybody's beliefs, it's just having fun. But I don't see where in the world they are. If there's any questions,
There was no questions. It was like two people in the chat, and one of them was the Jesus lizard, and the other is Lady Witch. So.
Thank you for watching, Lady Witch. I enjoy your comments, and I look forward to hearing more. And Lizard Guy, I want to check out your channel. It sounds fun. I like watching those kind of channels. I don't necessarily subscribe to a flat Earth, but I would love to watch your channel. Thank you for watching mine. And please check out Zabora's Kemetic Witchcraft. After I finish uploading, I'll post some links and re-edit and whatnot, the stuff at the bottom. So I know you have a big night ahead of you. You have to work tonight, and I will let you go.
No. I don't work tonight. I work tomorrow night. That's why I'm able to stay up late and do this chat with you.
Okay, well, if there's anything that you would like to share, or because again, I'm not part of this practice. I'm still kind of curious about it, very curious about it. I look forward to learning more about it. But again, so I don't know what kind of questions to ask other than what I asked before. So if you have anything to add, please go ahead.
Well, that's kind of hard, because it's hard once you've learned to ever kind of put yourself in the position to remember what it was like when you did not know, at least for me. So it's easier for me to answer questions than it is for me to tell you about what my path is, because ancient Egypt covered such a vast subject and their beliefs were so varied. I mean, like, we can talk about the Aeneid, we can talk about the 8 of Isis, Osiris, Horus and Sekhmet and their greatness and stuff. But there's over 2,000 deities, some of which are just mentioned once ever in one section, so it's hard to cover such a vast theology.
Well, I want to get your opinion on something. It's obscure. It's a recent find, but I did a video about the pagan origins of the Yahweh and the lost goddess of Israel. Now, the Asherah, which is her name, which later can be conflated with Astarte, but Astarte is a different deity, but they both represented from the same star. They both were fertility goddesses. So Israel, as it moved across the land, adopted other names and other gods goddesses to represent. They found, and again, no one knows why. Originally it starts as a shashera pole, just a pole, kind of like a Egyptian, a Native American totem pole, just not carved, just to represent her representation. Then that went from that to a grove of trees, also called an Asherah. But then they found, little idols to her, which kind of look like the ones you'd find in Europe, which are big hip, big bellied woman with big breasts, fertility, thing. And this was Asherah, right? But her detail became more personified, and for some reason, within the house of Israel, right? Okay, so there's this goddess in a house. Looks like she's chilling in an apartment complex, but for some fucking reason, the goddess below her, wearing the goddess of Israel as a fucking hat. Google this, try to find it. I found it a couple times. I actually have a picture that I saved, but no one knows why. Why would Hathor, which was the goddess identified, wearing the hat? Why would Hathor be wearing another goddess as a hat?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you exactly why.
What is that?
Hathor is Astarte. Hathor became Astarte when she traveled across the land. So you have a connection to El's wife through Hathor, who is the beauty goddess and the fertility goddess and the goddess, the cow goddess. So you have a link of Astarte and Asherah right there through Hathor.
Because I was talking to a Christian pastor one time, and there's something similar that they didn't understand, that there's a prohibition. There's a lot of different opinions, but no one actually has for fact why you're not supposed to have meat and cheese in Judaism, right? You're not supposed to have a cheeseburger, which I'd rather die. I love cheeseburgers, but there's a reason for this, and they goes to this little ritual that they perform. Do not boil a kid, in other words, a baby goat, in its mother's milk. Yeah. Right now, why is that forbidden? Well, this was actually a fertility spell that was forbidden to be practiced by the Israelites, because in the surrounding area, one of the Canaanite ways this is one of the ways where they're kind of severing their ties from Canaan, was the fact that, and one of the ways to get pregnant was believed to eat an animal that's been boiled in its own mother's milk. And this is a prohibition. But a lot of scholars who don't study magic don't make that connection. But yeah, that makes sense. Why Astarte and Hathor and Asherah. Asherah eventually became Astarte and eventually became Hathor. So it's kind of like me wearing a hat with a picture of himself. Okay.
Well, the Egyptians, the queens, you'll see them wearing like the vulture headed crown, so which is actually a goddess. So you actually have the power of the godhead. Have you ever seen the Egyptian deity crowns? Like Hathor's is giant horns with a solar disc right here to represent her link to the Eye of Ra as being an eye goddess. Sekhmet's the same way. She's got the giant solar disc. So the head is a huge representation of power and who you are in your image, because the Egyptians are all about that image. Whereas hoodoo, you got to have the name, which does appear in Egyptian mythology. With Egyptians, it was more about the image. So having a goddess sitting as a hat is just, to me, a power amplifier. And being their Egyptian roots through Hathor, it doesn't seem weird to me. It just seems like it'd be a blended path, no different than anything else we're doing today as eclectics.
If I remember, where I first heard about it was off a YouTube channel called Religion for Breakfast, where he basically talks about religion. He's I don't know his personality. I know he's not a lay person. He's not doing. I'm a lay person. I'm just doing this for fun and to share information. He's actually has a job studying archaeology, and that's religion for breakfast. I don't know him. I haven't even talked to him. He's never left a comment, but it's a good channel to look out for religion for breakfast, because he'll go into a lot of things that people have misconceptions about. Anyways, thank you for coming. If there's anything else, I guess we could end this right here on a good note. Thank you for being on the channel.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, you guys check her channel out. Give me we're expecting a delivery, and the dog knows that they're. So I will put a link to her channel below. Other than that, thank you guys. Bye.
Synaptic.
Well, Synaptic. Bye.